All right. More people joining. I'll give it a couple more seconds. Again, I'm in Berlin, Germany. I'm from the United States, born and raised in the States, but moved here about 5 years ago, enjoying my life here. All right. We will go ahead and get started. I'm gonna just close the meeting chat for a moment. All right, so welcome to the Dignity Standard session. I am Nichelle Appleby, and before we jump into my presentation, I want to do a bit of trivia. So some of you already practiced your typing chat skills, so let's get started on some trivia. So question one is, who has the most international soccer goals scored? No cheating. Who has the most international soccer goals scored? Lynn Williams? Nope. Anyone else want to try? It is right now the Euro Cup. Messi? Nope. Nope, not Messi. Any other guesses? Okay, the answer is Christine Sinclair with 190 goals over the course of her career so far. Hopefully my screen is advancing. Awesome, yes. All right, the next question is, what is the true or who is the true identity of Lady Whistledown in the Bridgerton series on Netflix? Yeah, well, season one spoilers. So if you haven't gotten that far, I can't help you. Anybody know? And I am a Bridgerton fan big time. Just saying, no shame. I love it. Anybody know the true identity of Lady Whistledown in the Bridgerton series? Yes, yes, you got it. Penelope Featherington. I was quite surprised 2 seasons ago. All right. And last but not least trivia is I am named after a famous actress. What is her last name? And what cult classic TV show did she appear in the 1960s? There's got to be at least one person, although I wouldn't be surprised. Nobody. You got it, Evangeline Nichols. And what cult classic TV show did she appear in? You got it, Tracy, Star Trek. Awesome, awesome. Yes, I am named after Nichelle Nichols, and she starred as Lieutenant Uhura in Star Trek the 1960s. My mother was a little girl in the 60s and loved her character and named me after her. And thank you, Mama. Love the name. Yes, a queen. All right, cool. So that's me, Nichelle Appleby. I am the founder of Work Imagined. I am the creator of the Dignity Standard, which is a model I'm going to share with you today to help you consider dignity as a key component of your culture and really help you build environments that support healthy and high-performing teams. So I'm going to start with a story that I call a privileged experience. In 2017, I embarked on a journey to change how I worked. I decided to become fully remote and spend more time with my family in the States and a few friends in different parts of the world. I was also looking for a professional challenge that would allow me to kind of get out of my career comfort zone because I had been kind of coasting a little bit and really helped me expand my skills. The company I joined ticked my boxes, especially in the professional development space. They had decided they were going to kind of look at their historical core business, which was having some challenges, and the board and executives wanted to change their pivot model, really pivot themselves and go through a multi-year transformation. So they wanted to change their core business model, like I said, and they really wanted to update their products and their services. And they were building up a rewards team to help them revamp their total rewards model overall to attract and retain the right talent for this new business model. I love this quote, the past is always tense, the future perfect. It's kind of a joke on the English language, but ultimately, this company was basically saying, out with the old, in with the new. But we all know nothing is perfect at any stage, past, present, or future. But it didn't concern me really. The business was changing in this big way. I knew there were going to be pitfalls and failures and mistakes, I knew people were going to leave. We're going to have new people join. There'd be a significant investments that really meant we had a lot of pressure to get things done. But I knew pressure. I had worked at big companies, traditional companies that were constantly changing. They were divesting companies, they were acquiring companies, they were ending whole business lines, there were layoffs happening, a lot of growing pains in the companies I worked with before this one. But through that, I really had a lot of great fun, worked with great people, and I learned a lot. As a rewards professional, it is always awesome that we get to work on business strategic relevant projects. And in this case, we're going to be reorganizing our jobs, thinking about pay and new hubs that we're opening up in different parts of the world, and revamping a reward system to attract that talent. So this was right up my alley, especially since I had been looking for a challenge. And I was ready, and also ready to free myself in the office, because that's really what I wanted as well. So I joined. I was bright-eyed and I was ready to go. But unfortunately, over 2 years, that work environment took its toll on my professional esteem. I experienced and I witnessed a lack of respect and the devaluing of myself and my colleagues. There was basically no code of conduct, and I did not share the loose ethics of this organization. The leaders did not hold themselves accountable for almost anything. And I watched the devolution of the entire company through the loss of really talented and skilled people that they had brought in to help them serve the business strategy and meet their goals. At one point, I was working with the vice president, and we had a great time working together. And she sent an email, which seemed quite sudden, to me and a few other people, that that day was her last day because the situation was no longer tenable. I remember the sentence because I had to look up tenable, which essentially means no longer to be able to be maintained or defended against attack or objection. It was a really bad environment. And it was really apparent to those of us who came to do the work that the work wasn't the challenge. That wasn't the problem. We came for that. We were hungry for the challenge. We were excited to see something change and see this transformation and have our hands in it. But what we could not, what we would not, and what we should not have had to deal with was a workplace that was devoid of dignity. I've been working in total rewards for about 15 years and have been focused on compensation. I started my career in executive compensation as an analyst, and I moved my way to global broad-based compensation in the first half of my career. And it was essentially a dream, honestly. I really enjoyed working. I was one of those kids who wanted a job really early. So at 12 years old, my dad let me go with him on Saturdays to his office and like file papers, and he would pay me 20 bucks. I like doing hard things. I like learning and growing. I like knowing things that nobody else knew. I like being in a niche. And I'm still that person. I still like that. But I didn't know that I was having a privileged experience at the beginning of my career. I thought everybody, or most people, were working with people they enjoyed, doing work they liked, working hard, and developing. I didn't realize that unhealthy was actually a lot more common. So I trudged that experience. When I say trudged, I trudged through that experience. And during that time, I sought out mentors and I read lots of books and listened to podcasts and YouTube videos and called my friends and my family and really trying to figure out how do I organize myself in this place? How do I work in this place where I feel like I'm not treated with dignity? And it was super clear that a lot of my friends and family and colleagues were experiencing the exact same thing. They were working in places where they came to do some cool stuff, but they couldn't get to the cool stuff really because they were dealing with these cultures that weren't healthy. Now that was back then. That was about halfway into my career, and now it's 2024, and we've experienced a global pandemic. We've had economic pressures from all different sides and all places. It's also a major election year in the EU and the US. The pressure is on for companies to be profitable, for shareholders to see returns, and for the business strategies that we're building to reflect what our investors care about. The macro and micro environments are not easier for businesses or employees from the past, now, and definitely not going to be in the future. Gallup actually released its State of the Workplace survey, the 2024 version this year, and they found that stress is causing a rapid increase in incivility at work. The number of people expressing stress, sadness, anxiety, anger, or worry has been on the rise, and it's reached its highest levels since Gallup began these surveys. This is leading to this incivility, this disrespect, this devaluing in the workplace. And stress is work in life. Sorry, stress is normal in life and it's normal at work. But in healthy environments, it doesn't lead to burnout, right? It doesn't turn people kind of away from their life. And it doesn't leave people every single day feeling less of the human they actually are. We're going to keep having challenges internally and externally. And that's why culture is so important. Culture is actually what makes us healthy. I'm sure we all know that Peter Drucker quote, or at least it was attributed to him, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. I think that really great business strategy is not just about what products we're building or who we're building them for or how much we're going to actually make while we're doing that. It's also about the kind of environment we're building internally to support the people who are building our products and serving our customers. It's about deliberately building an internal work environment that supports healthy and high-performing teams. Now, we talk about culture, and a lot of times we end up talking about all the little tangible benefits or perks that employees receive. But culture isn't about the pretty, shiny things. It's not about beer kegs, not about lunch on Wednesdays, not even about returning to work or working remotely, or the big, shiny things that people can ooh and ah at. Mindfulness apps and yoga mats are not going to fix a problem of culture, especially if there are poor management practices where dignity is not a core value and the foundation of the workplace behavior. At its core, culture is about how people engage with each other, how we develop and grow our interpersonal relationships, how we work through challenges together, how we respond to change together, and how we treat each other when we have abundant times and when we have lean times. Culture is also crucial because work has become an outsized part of our lives. Deloitte Digital has their Gen Z Insights 2023 report, and they found that 86% of managers and 61% of Gen Z employees see their jobs as a part of their identity. Now, I'm really happy to see that 25% gap because honestly, we need to start reclaiming our time, reclaiming our space so that our humanity is still the center of who we are. But the reality is, a large part of your workforce has attached who they are as a human to what they do in their job. It's why layoffs are so hard. It's not just that someone lost their job, they lost a part of who they are. I used to work at General Electric early in my career as a contractor, and I worked at the original headquarters in Schenectady, New York. That's right, Schenectady, New York. That's where Thomas Edison built the headquarters for GE when it was originated. And when I started working there, I had met people who had been working there for decades, and their fathers and mothers, and their grandfathers and grandmothers, and their great grandfathers and great grandmothers had been working there too. GE was in the blood, almost literally, and people attached themselves to that. And in those old traditional companies, it's similar like here in Germany for Siemens. The reality is that that hasn't changed. Even though people aren't staying at companies for as long as my grandfather or your grandmother did, they're still looking at work as a part of their lives. A lot of leaders might think that employees have to learn, how to put up their own boundaries. And, they might say, we're not asking for their lives, we're asking for their time and their skills, and we're paying them for it. But is that true? Is it true that they're only asking for something that seems to be an equal exchange? Exchanging time and money is not equal. Companies generate revenue, and in many cases, they continue to generate it over and over and over again. They're getting the money they're putting out back. But employees don't get time back because time is not a renewable resource. People have social and belonging needs that are far beyond the money they're being paid every day. There's a famous quote by a Swiss novelist, Max Frisch, And he's referring to the guest worker scheme, particularly in Germany after World War II in the 1950s and 60s. And the quote is, "We wanted workers, but we got people instead." Now, my husband was born and raised in Germany. Him and his siblings were. His parents came from Turkey as a part of the guest worker scheme. And when his father came here and eventually brought his mother, and they eventually had their children here, they needed to have a community. They needed to have people around them. And work was all they had at the time. When you open your organization up to hire people around the world, you're not hiring robots, you're hiring people. And people have needs. And when you know that people coming to your country, coming to your company, changing their lives to be where you are, sometimes work is actually the only place where they have a stable environment, the only place they actually engage with people on a regular basis. Moving countries is daunting. Moving cities is daunting. And the work environment needs to be a place where the culture is healthy enough and considers us and our humanity. Culture essentially is about human relationships and our humanity, and dignity is about upholding our humanity. And everyone deserves to experience dignity at work. So, before I keep going and share my model with you, I'd love for you to, in the chat, pop in what comes to mind when you hear dignity in relation to work. Don't be shy. Psychological safety, thank you. Respect, compassion. Anyone else want to give it a try? No pressure. Authenticity, equality. Thank you. Great. So part of what I'm going to share, what I'm going to share with you today essentially is the model I created called the Dignity Standard. I built this model because it was important for me as I went through that experience I shared with you before to understand what I was missing, what was so difficult about that environment. And so this model is a model that's focused on 4 components: respect, value, ethical treatment, and accountability. So let's go through some of the definitions that I actually created for this model so we can put it into context of what I mean. So respect. In this model, respect is considering the rights and wishes and feelings of people. Some people might say, well, feelings are individual, they're personal. Yeah, and feelings help drive how we behave. So considering these is important when considering what it means to respect people at work. Value. Value is believing someone's humanity is what gives them importance. It's also believing everyone has lived experiences, skills, and knowledge that can be important and beneficial in a shared environment. Ethical treatment is how you behave towards someone as it relates to the principles and values expected in your shared environment. You know, a lot of people, when I first built this model, were asking me, well, ethics are different everywhere. And I thought, you know what, you're right. And so what's really important about this definition is your shared environment, what's expected in this place based on where we are together. Most companies have a code of conduct, and that essentially becomes the baseline for your shared kind of ethics. Some companies don't have that, but every environment has shared ethics, and that's what's going to define the ethical treatment in that place. And last but not least, there's accountability. The expectation that you understand how your behaviors impact people and accept responsibility for reflecting on and adjusting your behaviors to contribute positively to your environment. Accountability is an important part of this model because without it, the other 3 have nothing to stand on or sit on. So these are really simple definitions, but of course, they are challenging in practice, especially with you as people leaders who are working with your executives, working with your company on what your culture should look like. And what I shared before about why culture is important and what culture is, you probably already know, right? Because this is your job. You're charged with doing work in your companies to build culture. And that's why dignity starts with you. I believe culture work is actually dignity work. As people leaders, you are tasked with far more than being an administrative function. It's no more just pink slips and typing things into a computer, right? We know you have a strategic role, and it's become your responsibility to work with the other executives and the board to ensure that all your teams serve business strategy and that employees are happy and engaged. This makes you the prime influencer, right? When you step in those rooms, a prime influencer to embed dignity into your culture strategy and make sure it supports your business. Years ago, a colleague said to me, the person with the most influence or privilege in the room is the person who has to change. It was really profound because often we expect the people who have the most influence or privilege or authority in an environment, they kind of do what they want. And everyone else kind of has to shuffle around them and fit around them and figure out how do we organize ourselves with this person. But her statement kind of made it clear to me that real change, right? Culture change, business change, strategy change, real change happens from the top. It's what it means. It's what it means to lead. It's what it means to adapt, to serve employees, and to serve the business. So you're in the perfect position to help drive that change in your organization, especially when we're thinking about dignity as the baseline or even at the core. I mentioned accountability before in my model as the baseline. And really, when you read different culture articles, go to HBR or even Forbes, for example, but HBR or other places, The Economist, one of the biggest factors of a healthy work environment is accountability. And it's not just to the work that we have to do, right? It's about what I mentioned before, how we treat each other, holding ourselves accountable for that respect, for that value, for that ethical treatment. And the leaders in your work environment, they're the ones who need to uphold that. Accountability essentially is the source of the success of this model. So, as I mentioned before, you as people leaders have a big influence in those conversations, and your leadership teams have to model healthy workplace behaviors in order for them to become a company's real, in order for those behaviors to become a real culture. Leadership can't just pay lip service to what's important, right? They have to do something about it. If you think about it, something as important, but also as simple as building an employee value proposition, right? It's a part of what every talent acquisition team or sometimes a broader HR team has to do. Really, you can't build a strong and relevant EVP that you share with the market and out to candidates if your employees can point out all the holes in their work experience. A dignity-based culture where leaders model the behaviors ensures that there's not a gap in what your recruiting teams are telling people and what your employees are actually experiencing. So the question becomes, how do you embed the dignity standard model in your organization? We talked about, of course, the personal part of it, right? It's how you respect people, value them, and treat them ethically, and your accountability to do so. But how you put this into your larger system? Well, as you know, like almost every people related thing, there's no one size fits all option. There's no 15 steps to. The answers ultimately come from understanding what your business strategy is, understanding what the business strategy needs are, and then what your culture journey is. If you understand those two things, you can actually develop and drive the development of the right practices or the processes that align with dignity behaviors and help your company actually create a healthy culture. Now, I'm not going to leave it there. Obviously, there are some things I think that you should do. So I'm going to give you some practical initiatives I think that are based in dignity that affect your larger system that you can start or continue. First things first, pay equity. I'm a rewards professional. I'm a compensation professional, and I would not be doing my duty if I was not spreading the compensation gospel. If I didn't talk about how pay equity is a way to ensure dignity is in your workplace. If you're in the US, which I know many of you are, Cali, Seattle, if you're in the EU, especially, there are laws in place to help push pay equity, mostly through pay transparency laws. So candidates and employees actually have the opportunity to know what you know, how much are you paying. And as a comp professional, in my experience in my career, I've had my skills devalued. I've had my pay not keep up with my peers. And if it can happen to me as a person who does this work, it is happening to people in your company. So, how do you get started on building pay equity to make sure you have dignity at work? First, there's your compensation philosophy. So, this actually guides you in making decisions and communicating those decisions to your employees. It establishes how your compensation strategy is going to support your organization's values and goals and describes how you plan to ensure internal equity. It determines how transparent you're going to be regarding pay, although in many cases, the law determines what that will be, and how you're going to remain externally competitive. This document becomes kind of your baseline for all your policies and practices going forward regarding compensation. The next thing is a job architecture. This is a very practical project that helps you determine what equal work means in your company when it comes to equal jobs. You want to use a job evaluation and leveling framework that helps you create a systematic approach to defining jobs and defining your pay. This helps you think about equal work and create consistency in developing a pay structure. It also supports pay transparency models, right? So if you have a good structure, you're able to more easily analyze pay and think about equal work. A job architecture project is really about leveling and job evaluation and grading your jobs, for example. But usually, as a part of that project, there is a real pay structure created. That way, you can think about your cash compensation, your stock options, the commissions your sales teams might have, any bonus programs you have to help build out a pay structure that makes sense for your company. Next, for pay equity, you want to make sure you have a clear analysis framework to know your numbers. If I asked any of you right now, if you know what the pay gap is between men, women, and non-binary individuals in your organization, if you can pull it up quickly, I don't expect to be on top of your head. If you can pull it up quickly because you don't have it, you have a problem, right? Need to know your numbers and be able to have a framework to identify pay gaps for multiple demographic dimensions. In the EU, we focus a lot on gender, but in the US, you capture a lot other data, right? Ethnicity, disability, veteran status, that sort of thing. Once you have that framework and do that analysis, tackle the pay gap. Make a plan. Work with your finance team, your executives, your board, even if you're in a place to have that conversation and say, listen, as an organization, we know dignity is important for our culture. Pay equity is one of the lowest hanging fruits you can pick up. It's actually on the ground. You can't even pick it. Pay equity is on the ground. Just pick it up off the ground. And let's do something about it. You're not going to fill all the gaps immediately. Most companies don't have the money. It's not a part of their plans, but build a plan for it. How much do we need for our most critical pay gaps? How do we make sure we keep and maintain the right level of internal equity across these demographic groups? These are questions you have to ask and answer through your plan, and then communicate that plan to your employees. I worked at a company right here in Germany, and right before I started working with them, they had gone through this process, and the managing board, decided they were going to close the pay gap completely. Now, that's like the dream. That's like music to a comp professional's ears. Yes, they're going to close the pay gap completely. But that's few and far between. So don't be daunted by when you have the numbers. Oh my gosh, we have to fix this. You do have to fix it, but you can do it over time. And what keeps you accountable, which is the most important part of this model, is by sharing that plan with your employees. This is what we found. Here's what we plan to do, and keeping them updated over time if things change. I was invited on a podcast end of last year called Diversity Secrets. And the host asked me if pay equity is the first step to dignity at work and to creating a really healthy environment that supports high-performing teams. And I thought about it for a moment because for me, number one is leadership. Leadership being accountable for how they show up to work every day and what they model. Then I explained to her, but yeah, pay equity is 1.1. Again, it's not pick it off the tree fruit, it's off the ground fruit. And ultimately, when you're working towards pay equity, it's really high on the list of a culture that's backed by dignity. Okay. Next, another practical system-wide thing you can do is create an inclusive environments by supporting the development of really great managers. Technology has been on high speed for decades, and AI is here, right? And AI, people are kind of like, up in arms about it and what's going to happen and how it's going to change. But we've had this before, right? If you've been working long enough, technology has changed over time. Things happen, things don't happen. It shifts how we work. The reality is that with every change, technological or otherwise, we have to think about at an organizational level how we manage people. Managers don't need to become more technically sound in their last job. They have to learn the skills that help them shift into engaging with people and developing the skills that they are able to use those skills to foster the right relationships in their teams and outside their teams to ultimately get work done. We all know people leave managers. This is always in all on Medium and these things. People leave managers. And if that's true, which I think it is in many cases, you can't afford to have really great people with great skills leave because their managers are ill-equipped. So supporting your managers through a robust training program or management development program so they understand at your company how to embed those values and what skills to use to be a good manager is really important if you want to get and keep great people. Really, in the end, all I'm saying is you can't leave it to new managers, whether they're new and developed in your company or you hired them in. You can't leave it to them to figure it out on their own. So, here are 3 dignity skills that I think are needed for managers to be successful. Sorry. So, first is cultural competence, right? We work in global environments. Many of us moved all over the world to work where we're working. So cultural competence focuses on sensitivity to cross-cultural differences and the ability to adapt to other cultural environments. If you're managing people who from different places than you are, speak different languages than you speak, have different skills than you have to be culturally competent and even culturally sensitive. Another dignity skill is conflict management and having hard conversations. I'm a huge fan of Dr. Brene Brown, and she has a great post on her website called Let's Rumble. It's from her Dare to Lead framework, and it's about being able to stay curious and generous and stick to solving hard problems or sharing difficult information while holding space for the challenge and the discomfort in that discussion. When we level up the skill for our managers, it helps their employees feel safe in the environment they're working in. And last but not least, there's empathy, being able to identify and understand the feelings of others without taking on those feelings. As I said before, we're all emotional creatures, right? Emotions drive our behaviors in many cases. So having the empathy helps managers be able to be culturally competent and manage conflict and have those hard conversations. These aren't soft skills. Excuse me. You know that. These aren't soft skills, right? These are hard skills to acquire and to develop. And all managers need these to be effective. So quickly, just another question to you. What additional dignity skills do you think managers need to be successful? You can just pop it in the chat. 1 or 2 would be great. Excuse me. And I see that you said, Brother Barbara, that we expect the influencer makes others change. That's true. So reacting to failure or large challenges, it's another skills. Thank you, Aubrey. Sorry. Anyone else want to share maybe one more skill that you think? Accountability and humility. Humility is major. Humility really is major. Okay, I'm going to move forward so we can end on time, certainly. All right, last but not least, I want to implore you, please do not stop your diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. We're talking about dignity practices that you can put across the organization that support your system to be healthy. DEI is one of those. A dignity-based culture understands the implications of an equitable and inclusive environment for supporting inclusive and high-performing teams. This is one of my favorite lines. Progress feels like oppression to the privileged. It's one of my favorite quotes because it encapsulates the time we're living in right now. We are in a climate in the EU and especially and specifically in the US where laws are changing, companies are pressured to remove DEI efforts altogether from their business strategy, and we're all forgetting what this was all about to begin with. In my world, diversity, equity, and inclusion outcomes are dignity. Or as I like to say, DEI is dignity work. I had someone say to me as I presented this model, they said, it's really refreshing that you're changing the wording around DEI. And I had to correct them because I wanted to make clear the dignity standard is not a replacement for DEI. The dignity standard is the foundation on which DEI sits. It is the reason for DEI. Excuse me. There's an E&Y European DEI index, and they found that 7% of companies, only 7% of companies are actually focusing on DEI outcomes and inclusive environments. But this is a really big missed opportunity because when you're trying to build inclusive and high-performing teams, they're not all from the same place. And you have to have equity and inclusion for the workplace to be healthy. People who belong to marginalized and oppressed groups have only asked that we uphold their humanity and treat them with dignity. Everybody wants to come to work, do good work with great people, learn and grow in their careers. Everybody wants to have that privileged experience that I had early in my career. And they want to have that without having to sacrifice their humanity to benefit other people. And we all know the research is super clear. DEI outcomes create higher levels of employee satisfaction and productivity, higher levels of belonging and psychological safety, increased financial growth, and increased innovation and customer satisfaction. Every top management firm has written a white paper 10 times over saying this. Even the small firms have done it. Medium articles have been written. There are YouTube videos and podcasts. Everybody knows that DEI outcomes are still critical for our business performance. So again, I ask you, please don't stop your DEI efforts. They are a part of what makes your workplace healthy, and it is about dignity. We talk about change a lot because change is inevitable, but something has to remain the same in times of change. Your business is coming to a big point of change. Maybe it's because you have so much growth now, or maybe you have to revamp a product. Maybe you have to divest a business line or close down an entire product that you thought was going to work really well. Maybe you have some mass hiring happening because you're doing so well. These are all changes, big ones. And let everyone else tell it, AI is going to be huge for us. A dignity-based culture is a key element to creating an inclusive environment and supporting those teams you need for your business strategy. And ultimately, employees know change is coming. They're not afraid of that. But they still need something they can rely on, something they can really stick to in these times of change to help them feel safe, connected, and engaged. So I'm asking that you let dignity be that stable factor because you don't have to compromise dignity in times of change. Having dignity as a value that is modeled and acted on every day will give your employees the supportive environment they need to execute the business strategy that you have to build and change all the time. It's not easy work. And if you present this to your leaders, they're going to find it very hard to disagree that dignity is a key part of how they're going to be able to move forward. But it's uncomfortable to implement because it requires personal change and it requires that personal change being seen across the business. But In my mind, the discomfort of shifting to a dignity-based culture proves dignity isn't already in place. Plus, as I told you before, I didn't come for easy. I came for change, I came for transformation. I'm that person. So I came to do the work and I came to embed dignity all along the way. So, my last question to you is how will you let dignity lead the way for you going forward? Ultimately, I'm super excited about having been able to share this with you all. Really excited that you came to this session to hear and also engage with me through the chat. So thank you so much for your time. And you can find me at workimagine.com. You can email me as well at Nichelle Appleby at workimagine.com if you have questions, if you just want to tell me that you thought it was great, or if you want to say this makes no sense, you want to have a dialogue with me. Really excited to be here and excited that Pando Horizons is doing this again. All right, that is the end. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your day wherever you are in the world.